I'm Shep Golden. Most folks remember the voices on the air, but I remember the hum, the soft glow of tubes warming up, the tiny red flicker that meant, we're live. I spent my life behind the glass, where sound was sculpture and silence was sacred. Tonight, we shine a light on the invisible ones, the engineers who kept live radio alive. From the 1940s to the late 1990s, broadcast engineers were part scientist, part artist, part firefighter. They came from the armed forces, from Bell Labs, from the back rooms of early hi-fi shops. They wore pocket protectors, yes, but also calluses and coffee stains. They carried the weight of continuity. When a transmitter failed or a reel jammed, it wasn't just a glitch, it was a moment when silence threatened to swallow connection. And connection was everything. If DJs were the faces of radio, engineers were the heartbeat. They measured pride in uptime. Their art was invisibility, making the impossible look easy. The old saying goes, when it sounds perfect, it means someone's fighting chaos just off mic. Game situation. Friday night, 1972, WCFL, Chicago. Lou Jack's mid-break, dropping one-liners like darts. Cue light flickers, amp overheating. Engineer dives under the console, pops the backplate, and swaps a tube in 15 seconds flat. Red light stays solid. City keeps listening. One silent victory, no highlight reel. They called us board ops at first, operators of control boards. By the late 50s, the term broadcast engineer took hold. Union shops demanded licenses, FCC logs, and hourly readings. If you forgot to note modulation levels or tower temperature, you could lose your job or your license. So we learned precision. Every hour, on the hour, someone wrote those numbers in pen and ink. In the early years, most engineers came up through the Army Signal Corps or from building their own ham radios. They were tinkerers, magicians, and medics of sound. They believed that clean modulation was a moral duty. They didn't talk about content. They talked about current, resistance, and signal-to-noise ratio. But what they really preserved was trust. Halftime, County Fair Remote 1975. The live band ends, crowds buzzing, and the feed from the fairgrounds cuts dead. Engineer grabs a soldering iron, patch cords, a flashlight in his mouth. 2 minutes later, the audio snaps back. Announcer never misses a beat. That's fourth quarter heroics. Unseen, unrecorded, unforgettable. Women joined engineering earlier than most remember. By the 1960s, many small market stations had women running full shifts alone, logging tower readings, queuing carts, even repairing transmitters. They faced the same static, both literal and cultural. Their notebooks, meticulous diagrams, and patch notes are now artifacts of radio's golden craft. I remember one winter at WCFL. Snow thick as static outside. The tower lights iced over, so a team climbed a structure in freezing rain to keep the beacon alive. We joked that the signal itself was warmer than the air. But truth is, every engineer knew the risk. You don't climb 400 feet in sleet for fame. You do it because dead air feels like failure. Inside the booth, it's a 2-minute drill every break. One cart jams, another cue's late. Engineers' hands hover like a goalie, anticipating disaster. Switch, fake, slide, clean handoff. The listener hears none of it. That's the win. By the 1980s, engineers had become both mechanics and diplomats. They balanced the demands of talent, sales, and management, while still maintaining air chains and satellites. The arrival of automation promised relief, but brought anxiety. Would machines replace judgment? Could software predict panic? Turns out, no algorithm knows how to calm a host mid-crisis or restart a frozen playout with steady hands. Good engineers know when not to speak. Their power lives in patience, in listening before touching. A fader isn't just control, it's empathy translated into voltage. You can hear the ones who care. The air feels balanced. Picture it. Emergency broadcast, late night, thunder rolling, studio lights flicker, UPS kicks in, and the engineer leans in, calm as a surgeon, patch to backup transmitter, feed steady, host keeps talking. Listeners never know how close they came to silence. Radio is continuity made audible. Without the caretakers behind the glass, history itself would sound fragmented. They captured the moon landing, presidential speeches, breaking news, and the laughter of local mornings. They archived the pulse of a century, 1 decibel at a time. You can tell an engineer's personality by their workspace. Neat desks mean stable minds. Chaotic ones, well, those were the geniuses. Stacks of cables like ivy, manuals annotated to the edge, and always, a coffee ring on the logbook. Overtime. Fundraiser live from a high school gym 1983. Mixer half dead, power uneven, feedback screaming. Engineer twists one knob, slaps a ground lift, and suddenly it's clean. Crowd cheers, signal rides steady all night. You can't coach that. There's poetry in precision. Broadcast engineers work in milliseconds. One miss, one drift, and timing collapses. But when it all syncs, the voice, the spot, the stinger, it's symphonic. Invisible art, perfectly timed. I've met engineers who could feel modulation in their bones. They'd walk into a room and know a channel was out of phase by instinct. They were human spectrum analyzers, part intuition. When they were tired, they didn't stop listening. They just tuned to different frequencies. Grandkids, porches, rain on 10 roofs. Final drive, midnight sign-off. Engineer fades the last record, logs the meter readings, powers down the transmitter. The tower light blinks against the horizon. Another day, perfect score. You don't celebrate perfection. You protect it. When Sheldon Post trained younger techs, he'd say, "Good engineering makes talent taller and problems quieter." He meant it literally and spiritually. The job was never about applause. It was about stewardship, about making sure the signal outlived you. Every on-air legend we've covered, Blue Jack, Wolfman Jack, the jingle singers, the storytellers, stood on the quiet strength of people like Sheldon, people who believed that connection itself was sacred. Every night they proved it, soldering wire into wonder. Next time on Retrowaves, we turn the dial to college radio, where rebellion met purpose and the next generation of voices found its sound. Same signal, new legend. I'm Shep Golden, and this one's for every engineer who ever kept the light on and the silence away. Retrowaves, Legends of the Airwaves is a Journey Wise Studios production.